come on, man.
And
how's Tupac number one when he needed help on that record? One me took out four and the manager.
wow.
I mean, damn.
That's the gas. He just dropped some shit called. And if you listen to it, you can see he hit him up and was like, oh.
Ice Cube was a legend that Tupac Shakur perhaps discounted as a relic. So when Cube went at him, Pac promised he won't let it fly.
I'm not gonna let that happen, because then that would make me obsolete. If I let him come back and take, you can't have this. You know what I mean? I'm not doing it.
But you can say Pac found the hard way that Cube is not someone you easily mess with.
One me took out four the manager.
Wow.
I mean, damn.
These are two men who, on paper, should have been allies. But instead of a legendary collaboration, we got a Cold War. A tension-filled, ego-driven standoff that never fully ignited but still left scars. There were no public shootouts, no grand declarations of war, just years of low blows and strategic remarks, making Pac finally realize that Cube was a dangerous man.
I know what he's doing is wrong. He's ain't selling, so now he's going on a war. And he's using us.
Pac once idolized Cube, studying his style, his delivery, his fearless attitude. The respect was real, but so was the competition, especially when Pac started dating Cube's protege Yo-Yo. And when Pac rose to power under death row, the divide between them became even more pronounced.
I dig Ice Cube. I looked up to him. But because I looked up to him and I studied his style, mastered his shit, I know what he's doing is wrong.
Cube wasn't about to bow down to anyone, especially not someone he saw as a young upstart who hadn't paid enough dues. And so, he never acknowledged his talent, and even years later, wouldn't list him among his favorite rappers.
My greats are people like Melly Mel.
Ooh.
Ice-T.
Ooh.
Chuck D. Karis One.
Ooh.
I'll put Rakim in there.
Was Cube simply jealous of Pac's success, or could he not just be bothered? Let's talk about it. Two kings, one throne. The relationship between Ice Cube and Tupac was about power, principles, and the shifting tides of West Coast rap. Both men carried the weight of their personas like armor. Cube, the militant lyricist with a revolutionary's fire, and Pac, the unpredictable poet-warrior, ready to throw fists or philosophy depending on the moment. He had a big aura.
There was something, something around him, some sort of aura that, can't put my finger on it.
When they met on tour in 1990, the chemistry was instant and there was mutual respect. Cube had already left NWA and was carving out his own legacy, while Pac, fresh off Digital Underground's coattails, was proving he wasn't just another rapper, but a force of nature. Pac was a student of the game, and Cube was the teacher he respected most. For Pac, Cube wasn't just a rapper, he was a blueprint. Cube had proven that you could step away from a powerful group, stand on your own, and still dominate. He had taken gangster rap and sharpened it into a weapon of political resistance. That was exactly the kind of fire Pac wanted to bring to his own music. So he studied Cube, admired him, and saw him as the big brother he never had in the industry.
I remember him being a little frustrated, you know what I'm saying? Because he's like, Cube, I want to make the kind of records y'all make. That's what I'm on. I ain't really on this, this dancey stuff.
And Cube also liked Pac. The energy, the passion, the relentless hunger. It was infectious. Cube recalled those nights on tour when everyone else was exhausted, crashing in their hotel rooms, while Pac was still bouncing off the walls, knocking on doors, waking people up. "No sleep, no sleep," Pac would yell, hyped up like a boxer before a title fight.
Nobody had more fun on tour than Pac. He knocking on everybody's door.
Oh, and Hannah.
You sleep? What? Nah, no sleep. No sleep. Nah, come on, man. Get dressed, Cube. Come on, let's go downstairs. He running around with all the energy in the world. We sleep, but he got all the energy in the world.
Cube saw the drive, the determination, and maybe even a little bit of himself in the young rapper. It was all love. They saw in each other reflections of their own rage, intelligence, and drive. But in hip-hop, proximity breeds competition. And when the industry starts whispering, alliances can crack before they ever fully solidify. The tension didn't start as a direct beef, more like an ideological divide. Cube, the man who had once set fire to NWA with no Vaseline,
I saw it coming, that's why I went solo and kept on stomping.
had settled into his status as a rap icon and Hollywood-bound businessman. Pac, on the other hand, was chaos incarnate, living every bar he spat. He was never going to settle for only being a little brother. He was watching, listening, taking mental notes. He told Cube outright that he wasn't about this dance music life. He wanted to make records like Cube. The party anthems Digital Underground was known for was just a stepping stone.
He was just doing that just to, kind of,
get started,
facilitate till he can get and do his own style.
Pac wanted to talk about the real struggles, the pain, the oppression, the violence in his neighborhoods.
He would always tell me like, this digital shit is cool, man, but I want to do records like y'all, I want to do. He said, because where I live at, this shit is f***ed up, you know what I'm saying? I want to talk about how the shit is,
Cube respected it, encouraged it even. But maybe he didn't realize at the time he was creating his own competition. For a while, their paths still ran parallel. Cube watched as Pac climbed, and Pac continued to look to Cube as a source of inspiration. They both had music in Hollywood. Cube starred in Boys in the Hood, then Trespass. Pac made his debut in Juice. And then in Poetic Justice, Singleton wanted Cube. Cube read the script, didn't like it. His issue was the scene where the lead character, Lucky, kicks his homeboy out of the car over a girl he just met. Cube wasn't feeling it. It made the character look weak, so he passed, and Pac got the role instead.
I only had one problem with it, and he didn't want to change it, so I didn't want to do it. The problem was, I didn't think me playing Tupac that I would kick my homeboy out the car for a girl I just met. I didn't think that was cool. It made the character kind of a sucker to me.
No bad blood, though. Cube even said later, it was cool to see another rapper get a shot on the big screen.
It was real cool to see, John taking another rapper under his wing and turn him into a fucking star.
The friendship held for a while. They linked up on Pac's Last Words, a 1993 track that also featured Ice-T. There's footage from that studio session, the three of them laughing and vibing. But then, soon after, Pac was no longer just another rapper trying to make it. He was coming for the top spot, and Cube could feel it. The energy between them started to change. Cube wasn't in the business of handing out crowns. He had built his legacy through struggle, through fights with labels, through cutting ties and betting on himself. And now, here came Pac, moving with that same fire, that same aggression, and the same hunger that had made Cube a legend. Pac was no longer the little brother tagging along. He was competition. This was where the seeds of tension were planted. Pac started to feel like Cube wasn't giving him his flowers. The beef between them started to grow, and soon a woman was caught in the middle. That woman was Yo-Yo. How Yo-Yo got caught in the middle? Yo-Yo was Cube's protege, a female MC with serious bars and an independent streak that made her stand out in a male-dominated industry. Cube took her under his wing, produced her debut album, and positioned her as the female voice in his camp.
I was working with Ice Cube and he was dancing for Digital Underground.
But Pac saw something else in her, something Cube didn't like. Pac and Yo-Yo were tight. They had met when Pac was still rocking with Digital Underground, and as his career took off, so did their relationship. They shared a bond that blurred the lines between friendship and romance. The two even dated for a while.
And we dated, and Pac, we became great friends, which later ended up in a relationship, which turned into a friendship. Because the relationship just couldn't last.
Pac was magnetic, and as his star rose, so did the whispers that Cube wasn't feeling how close he and Yo-Yo had become. On the surface, it was just another industry relationship, but behind the scenes, Cube had his reservations. Was he being protective, or was there a deeper reason for his unease? No one could tell. The reason didn't matter until 1994, when Pac was recording his breakthrough album Me Against the World. He had a vision for Dear Mama. The song was raw, emotional, and deeply personal, an open letter to the woman who had shaped him.
Dear Mama came about because Tupac loved his mom so much, man. Tupac had love for his mom so much.
But Pac wanted something extra to tie it all together. A sample from Ice Cube's It's a Man's World, the track where Cube and Yo-Yo traded verses in a heated battle of the sexes. Yo-Yo's voice was central to the track, symbolizing the push and pull between men and women in hip-hop.
If I'm not mistaken, Yo-Yo was supposed to be on Dear Mama, right?
Man, that's the key point right there. I'm glad you brought that up, Almighty, because a lot of people don't know that the original version of Dear Mama had Yo-Yo on the hook, and she was saying, "What be a damn thing without a woman?"
Pac wanted to repurpose that energy, to transform it into a tribute that honored his mother and uplifted black women. Cube wasn't having it. He shut it down. No clearance, no discussion, just a firm, unwavering no.
And so I knew that was, Ice Cube's call right there.
On the surface, it seemed like business. Cube owned the rights, and if he didn't want his work sampled, that was his prerogative. But in an industry built on flipping beats and borrowing hooks, Cube's refusal felt personal. Pac certainly took it that way. To him, it was a betrayal. He saw it as Cube deliberately blocking him from making a classic. And worse, it wasn't just about him. It was about Yo-Yo too. Yo-Yo had no idea what was happening behind closed doors. She wasn't even consulted. If she had been, she likely would have given Pac her blessing. So when she found out what had happened, she was heartbroken.
You know, stop that. Stop your piece from coming on Dear Mama. Tears came out of her eyes. She didn't even know.
She wasn't just Ice Cube's artist. She was an artist in her own right, with her own voice and agency. But now, she was being used as a pawn in a silent war between two rap titans. When DJ King Assassin, the producer of Dear Mama, told her the news, she broke down in tears. That sample was Pac's way of showing love, not just to his mother, but to Yo-Yo as well.
Kind of like that egoism gets involved, and I think definitely Ice Cube that's the only way that he could have stopped anything from happening with them.
The tension between Cube and Pac wasn't just about one song though, it was about the shifting tides of power in West Coast hip-hop. By the mid-90s, Pac was on fire. His acting career had taken off, and his music was hitting new levels of depth and emotion. Cube, on the other hand, was transitioning. He had already conquered gangster rap and was now expanding into Hollywood, comedy, and family-friendly roles. The more Pac thrived, the more Cube seemed to be fading into the background. Whether or not he'd admit it, the game was changing and Pac was at the forefront. Yo-Yo, meanwhile, was left stranded in the middle. She had started out as Cube's artist, but her relationship with Pac had made things complicated. After the Dear Mama incident, her career took a different turn. Cube had produced her first 3 albums, but by 1994 their working relationship was strained. Cube had always been a gatekeeper, and once the bridge between him and Pac burned, Yo-Yo was caught in the fallout. Her next album lacked Cube's influence, and though she remained a respected figure, her career never quite reached the heights it once promised. Pac never forgot Cube's move. Even as Dear Mama became a classic without the sample, the sting remained. To Pac, it wasn't just about a song. It was about loyalty, respect, and power plays in an industry where every move mattered. Cube had drawn a line, and Pac had taken note.
He was mad about it. I mean, because Yo-Yo's his friend. He thought Ice Cube was his friend, you know what I mean? And after that, I think Ice Cube kind of lost his clout with Tupac at that point.
The two never publicly aired out their differences in diss tracks or interviews, but the Cold War between them continued to worsen. Also, when Ice Cube was gearing up for the America's Most Wanted tour in the same 1994, Pac was meant to roll with him. This was the kind of coast-representing, high-energy spectacle that could have solidified their alliance. But then, Pac's legal troubles came knocking. The walls closed in. Instead of stadiums and roaring crowds, he got handcuffs and court dates, and Cube simply kept it moving. Pac saw himself as a soldier in the war that hip-hop had become. Whether it was the East Coast versus West Coast beef, or just the battle for dominance in the game, he expected Cube to wait, to reach out, to show some kind of solidarity. But Cube, ever the businessman, didn't look back. Pac saw it as abandonment, as yet another OG turning his back. Cube saw it as survival. He had his own empire to build, and waiting for Pac wasn't part of the plan. Then came West Side Slaughterhouse.
Hip-hop started in the West. Ice Cube bailing through the East without a vet.
Cube had formed West Side Connection, linking up with Mac 10 and WC. And in 1995, while Pac was still locked up, they took aim at Common over I Used to Love Her. The record was a full-on West Coast war cry. If there was ever a moment for Cube and Pac to stand shoulder to shoulder, this was it. But Pac was still behind bars, watching the fight happen without him. When he got out, he noticed who had reached out, who had held him down, and who had been silent. Cube was in the latter category. By the time Pac got out of prison in late 1995, he saw himself as the undisputed Don of the West Coast. Death Row was behind him, Suge Knight was putting muscle into his every move, and Pac was at the center of the East Coast-West Coast war. But suddenly Ice Cube started moving different, started talking different. The same Cube who once carried himself like a militant revolutionary was now calling himself the Don, dropping mafioso-style raps and leaning hard into the whole West Side aesthetic. Pac saw it as blatant arrogance, and he wasn't shy about saying it. "This dude wasn't talking like this before I got out," Pac said in interviews, throwing direct shots at Cube.
Why he wasn't making them bow down when I was in jail? That's what I mean. That's wrong.
And he had a point. Before Pac's release, Cube wasn't exactly positioning himself as the king of the coast. He was an OG, no doubt, but he had never pushed this whole West Coast Don image to the forefront. Now, all of a sudden, he had the demeanor, the ad-libs, even the hand signs that Pac had made famous. The biggest sticking point was the W hand sign. Now, to Cube's credit, he had referenced throwing up the W as far back as 1993's Enemy, and fans loyal to him pointed that out whenever the debate came up. But here's the thing. Nobody really associated it with him, not in the way they did with Pac. It wasn't until Pac started flashing that W in photos, videos, and live performances that the symbol became an undeniable West Coast staple.
Can we start with that? Can you show him how to throw up the West Side properly?
Okay. It's right here. You do it like this.
You can see the arthritis in his hands.
Put this finger in front of the other. Just hold it up.
And that's what got under Pac's skin. He saw Cube adopting the gesture right after All Eyes on Me dropped, and it felt like bandwagon behavior. To make things worse, Cube didn't even throw it up the same way. Pac's version, hiding the thumb to create a clean four-fingered W, became the standard, while Cube's version, with his thumb exposed, never quite took off the same way. Pac noticed, and he clowned him for it. The tension between the two kept building up, and the accusations of biting only made matters worse. On the track, two of America's most wanted, Pac and Snoop created a gangsta anthem. It was a moment that symbolized them as the new kings of the West, but the title was eerily close to Cube's classic album, America's Most Wanted. Cube noticed. He wasn't feeling it. To him, it was theft. But Pac also thought Cube was the one trying to steal from his style. Then the rumors started, the subtle shots and interviews. Pac felt Cube had become too comfortable, too detached from the raw struggle he once championed. The feeling was mutual. Cube, a master strategist, also saw Pac's recklessness as a liability. And then there was the unspoken issue of ego. Both men commanded attention. Both were seen as kings in their own right. The idea that one should bow to the other was impossible. Was Cube really dangerous? The boiling point of their beef came with the track Bow Down by Westside Connection in 1996. Though not a direct diss to Pac, it carried enough coded language to fuel speculation. The whole message, bow down to the real kings of the West, rubbed Pac the wrong way. It sounded like Cube was setting himself up as the gatekeeper of the West Coast at a time when Pac saw himself as the true leader of the movement. And in that music video, Pac swore Cube was taking shots. A dude who looked eerily similar to Pac's early 90s self was bowing down and kissing Cube's ring. Also, Pace thought he was trying to copy the style of his Hit 'Em Up track.
He just dropped some shit called Badass. And if you listen to it, you can see he heard Hit 'Em Up. It was like, oh, that's how it's supposed to be.
The implication was clear. Cube was the boss, and everyone else, even Pac, had to pay respect. Whether or not that was Cube's intent, Pac wasn't having it. Never one to let disses slide, Pac fired back in his infamous interview with Sway, dismissing Cube as a cartoonish figure who had lost touch with the streets. It was more than words. It was a challenge to Cube's very identity. But the thing about Cube, he never really fired back. Not directly, at least. While Pac was airing him out in interviews, Cube was quiet, calculated. He never went out of his way to address Pac's accusations, never fed into the drama publicly. It was almost like he saw himself as above the beef, like he didn't need to explain himself. Or maybe he knew that engaging would only fuel Pac's fire. Either way, Pac saw that silence as proof that Cube wasn't ready for a direct confrontation. After Pac's death, Pac never got the chance to make his next move though. When he was gunned down in September 1996, whatever lingering resentment existed became irrelevant. Cube, never one to mourn publicly, acknowledged the loss but stayed distant from the theatrics of tribute tracks or public outpourings. In Pac's absence, the lines became blurred. The Outlaws carried the torch, keeping their suspicions alive, analyzing Cube's every move for signs of disrespect. And Cube kept playing the long game. He never openly dissed Pac, but he also never let him define the West. When he dropped We Be Clubbin' in 1997 featuring an ad-lib eerily similar to one Pac had used in Bomb First, people took notice.
In every city you find me, look for trouble right behind me. Outlaw down to die for me.
Was it homage, a taunt, a coincidence? Hip-hop doesn't believe in coincidences. Years later, Cube made his stance even clearer, by omission. In an interview, he left Pac off his list of the top 15 greatest rappers of all time.
Man, I'm gonna just leave that last one blank, man, for everybody who
That's a smart
know I
choice.
like they.
Let that sink in. No matter how you spin it, that's a statement. That's an unspoken jab. Cube wasn't just erasing Pac from his rankings, he was subtly reinforcing the idea that, in his mind, Pac never reached his level. So why didn't this beef erupt like the others? Simple. Cube knew how to play the game. He wasn't going to let Pac drag him into a war that could have cost him more than just credibility. He wasn't Suge Knight moving recklessly. He wasn't Biggie, caught off guard by Pac's onslaught. Cube was calculated. He kept his distance, maintained his power, and let time do the work for him. And in the end, that might have been the coldest move of all. A beef that never exploded, a war that never truly started. But still, decades later, it hits just as hard.